Healing had you to a barn door yet.
What?
Often imitated, rarely duplicated, Lara Croft's many adventures over the years have ensured her a place in the Platformer Hall of Fame, and given the Tomb Raider franchise far greater staying power than anyone could have dared to dream of back in 1996. Despite not getting into the series until Legend, over the years I've gained a great love for the classics from core design. In fact, I would cite The Last Revelation as my personal favorite Tomb Raider. Which means I was stoked when I first heard about this remaster compilation courtesy of Aspyr, then slightly less stoked when I found out it was only going to be a compilation of the first 3 games, but still stoked enough to buy it anyways. And then I realized,
you know, sauerkraut and corned beef would make a good sandwich.
And then he gets a not useless idea.
This was the perfect excuse to talk about the early Tomb Raider titles on my channel. To spare myself the pain of editing another super long video nobody wants to watch,
Hi, how are you?
I'll be splitting this into 3 videos covering each game individually. And in order to keep myself, as well as my viewers, from burning out on Tomb Raider content, I'll be spacing these videos out. Sound good? I can't actually hear you, so I'll just have to assume you said yes and get on with the show. Released in 1996 for the Saturn, PS1, and MS-DOS, Tomb Raider was developed by England's Core Design and is the brainchild of Toby Gard. Prior to the 5th generation of consoles, Core Design, like many European developers, primarily developed games for the Commodore Amiga. If my American accent doesn't give it away, I'm not exactly an expert when it comes to Amiga titles. I mean, I enjoy a few games like Alien Breed and Turrican, but it's a definite gap in my retro gaming knowledge. As far as I can tell though, Core appears to have been successful enough to occasionally publish games from other developers. They would venture out onto consoles from time to time as well, typically with ports of their Amiga games, but also with a few console-exclusive titles such as Soulstar and the Sega CD. However, it was with the advent of 32-bit systems that Core Design would transition to focusing on home consoles, swiftly becoming a household name with the runaway success of the first Tomb Raider. Now, countless articles and essays have been written on the history and importance of Tomb Raider and its leading lady, but I feel like less has been said of the game itself. We all know Lara Croft and how, alongside Mario 64, her adventures set the standard for 3D platformers for an entire generation. Yet it seems to me that very rarely do any of these article writers or content creators bother to mention if the original Tomb Raiders are worth playing today. Short answer, yes, with the exception of Chronicles. Long answer, so long as you're willing to give tank controls a chance, they're absolutely worth playing today. With the exception of Chronicles. That one's only worth it if you're desperate for more classic Tomb Raider.
You don't like me? Fine. Watch anime.
Note that I'm not including Angel of Darkness in this list because it's from a later console generation.
Someone fat get in my way!
What made Tomb Raider stand out from the pack at the time, and in many ways still does, is its focus on planning out your jumps rather than the test of reflexes common to most platformers. Outside of turning a bit in mid-air, there's no air control to Lara's jumping. Once you take that leap, your path is set, so you'd better have put some thought into it.
Dead!
On top of that, you'll have to manually control whenever Lara grabs onto a ledge. Many younger gamers will likely have the same reaction I did when I first heard of such a concept, and assume that this is an unnecessary complication to something that could have been handled automatically. However, once I'd actually played Tomb Raider, it was hard to imagine the game without this feature. In a way, it feels like I have more control over the situation. I think we've all had a moment or two where we just wanted to get off a platform, and our character kept grabbing the ledge instead. Here, that's not a problem. Lara follows the buttons you press and nothing extra. If you screw up a jump or you miss a ledge, that's on you, buddy. In many ways, it's akin to a 3D take on cinematic platformers like Prince of Persia well before the Prince made his leap to 3D. The controls are heavy, but not unwieldy because the game was designed with this in mind. Single platforms are deliberately just long enough for you to walk to the edge, then hop back by tapping down on the D-pad to give yourself enough space to perform a running jump. For those still unwilling to give tank controls a chance, the Remastered collection does conveniently add a modern control scheme. This enables full 360-degree movement with the stick and greater control over the camera. Though it works, The problem is that these games weren't built with this control scheme in mind, so there are a number of annoyances to deal with. For example, the step-back hop you can do whenever with the tank controls can only be done with your weapons drawn with the modern control scheme. For setting up a running jump, this isn't too bad, but it nearly removes the ability to hop back off a platform and grab the ledge because of the time it takes Lara to holster her guns. Now, the more reliable way to do this is by dodge rolling from about the middle of the platform. It's a strangely advanced thing to ask of players who almost certainly picked this control scheme because they wanted something more convenient. The camera doesn't handle too well either. In open areas, like what you'll experience for most of the early game, it works fine. Once you get into tight corridors, this thing just does whatever it wants. Camera fuckery is nothing new to the Tomb Raider series. In fact, it's practically a staple from the PS2 onwards. But when the camera did cause problems in the earliest games, you knew that pushing forward moved Lara in the direction she was facing. Really though, these issues could have been solved with one change. Have the D-pad retain the tank controls when using the modern scheme. It already moves Lara the same as with the left stick, why not have a hybrid system in place? While it wouldn't have stopped the camera from doing its weird thing in close quarters, I would at least be able to switch to a more stable movement control in those situations. To give this control scheme some credit, swimming feels fantastic with modern controls. Any Tomb Raider veteran can tell you all about the anxiety-inducing swimming sequences in the original games. Having to clumsily maneuver Lara about like a submarine while her air supply steadily ticks down provided the kind of tension that Alfred Hitchcock could only wish he had in his films. And that's before you have to start dodging all the crocodiles looking for an easy lunch. With the modern scheme though, you can easily move about in the water as the movement controls actually move her forward instead of needing to hold down the jump button the whole time to propel Lara, with vertical movement underwater now handled by moving the camera up and down. And for whatever reason, the camera seems to control better while swimming, as it took all the way until Tomb Raider 2 before I had any major issues with it. That's right, even though I still vastly prefer the tank controls, I'm going to be using modern controls all the way through, partially out of masochism and partially to prove a point. I may think that the modern controls are worse than the original's controls, but that doesn't mean they're unplayable. Your platformer can control however you wish, but it doesn't mean squat if your level design isn't any good. Fortunately for all of us Tomb Raider fans, Core made excellent use of Tomb Raider's primary mechanics to craft levels that were deviously difficult without being punishingly brutal. Tough but fair, basically. Befitting the slower pace required of the platforming, classic Tomb Raider level design is closer to solving a complex puzzle than relying on swift reflexes. Oh, it will still demand good reflexes from you later on, but struggling to figure out where you're supposed to go next is as much a part of the difficulty as evading the countless traps. After multiple videos of me griping about the games I've played lacking useful maps to consult, you'd think I would complain about the same thing here, right? Well, I'm gonna have to be a hypocrite because I think adding a map feature to any classic Tomb Raider would ruin the experience. Exploring these open, maze-like levels is half the fun. And really, 99% of the time I got lost had more to do with me being an inattentive idiot than through any fault of the level design. This for sure wasn't an Ease 2 situation where half the rooms looked the damn same, I just couldn't find the way out because I was overthinking it. In addition to the correct path through each level, Tomb Raider has secret areas stocked with extra health and ammo scattered about. These range from barely out of the way enough to count as a secret to, I was just saying how inattentive I am, do you really think I could find any of these secrets? I don't know if I'm alone on this, but I haven't been able to escape the thought that classic Tomb Raider level design shares a lot in common with boomer shooters, particularly ones from 3D Realms. The levels are big, technical showcases focusing on navigating complex mazes to find the key or switch that will open a door to let the player progress. And to encourage the player to explore every nook and cranny, the amount of secrets found are tracked on the end-of-level stat screen.
It's official. You suck.
I could be completely off base here, but this was something that kept scratching at the back of my mind as I worked on this video. Ironically, Duke Nukem would get a pair of third-person shooters on the PS1 as well as one on the N64 that clearly take cues from Tomb Raider. So if there was an influence, it wound up going both ways.
He said they go both ways.
Like a bisexual.
Thank you, Ted. That was the joke.
Then there's all the blocks you'll have to push and pull. So many blocks. The worst part is when you realize that you moved it the wrong way and have to take even more time pushing it back down the hallway. As an aside, I'd throw my back out if I tried to carry more than one case of bottled water, and here's Lara dragging these huge blocks that probably weigh several hundred pounds. I guess Tomb Raider works on the anime rule that cup size equals strength. Back to the game, in an interesting deviation from what most would expect these days from a Tomb Raider installment, there's actually very little combat against human enemies in this first game. Yes, despite classic Lara Croft's mimetic reputation as a ruthless mass murderer, that was an aspect the original design team at Core actively worked to avoid. Instead, the only human enemies in the game are all bosses working for the Big Bad. Now, Lara Croft, enemy of nature? That's always been canon. With the rest of the enemy roster composed entirely of animals and oh my god, what the fuck is that? I've beaten this game multiple times and I always forget about those things. Due to being an early 3D game, as well as it simply not being much of a focus, the core combat in Tomb Raider is extremely basic. Lara will automatically aim at enemies with whatever weapon you have equipped, and from there you shoot at them until they're dead. This is where the tank controls will be at their most awkward for first-timers. Most enemies can move slightly faster than Lara, so running away to get space isn't an option. This makes jumping around like a maniac your best option, as Lara can continue to fire away at foes in mid-jump. One nice quality of life touch in the remaster is adding the twisting somersault, originally introduced in Tomb Raider 2,
This is even more painful than it looks.
to the first game. Seeing as how the forward leap is the best way to avoid charging enemies, being able to spin in the air and land facing them is incredibly useful without significantly disrupting the difficulty balance. A far more unnecessary addition is the boss health meter at the bottom of the screen whenever you're using the remastered visuals. It feels downright out of place in Tomb Raider's minimalist UI, and unless they've updated it since I recorded footage, there's no way to turn this off. It also removes some tension from boss fights, as you know exactly how much longer this fight's gonna go. And when these fights all boil down to keep shooting until they're dead, that tension was about all they had going for them. Continuing with the lack of focus on combat, Lara's arsenal is probably at its smallest in the whole series, with only her iconic infinite ammo pistols akimbo, shotgun, twin magnums, and dual Uzis, which are actually MAC-10s, but every SMG in the 90s was called an Uzi for reasons unknown. Frankly, it's a small miracle that Tech 9 didn't get the stage name Lil Uzi. Reference rapper half my audience has likely never heard of? Check. All I have to do now is work in a Norwegian black metal joke within the next 5 videos and I'll have a hipster bingo! Returning to Tomb Raider's weaponry, the basic pistols are obviously going to be your workhorse weapons, what with their infinite ammo. When it comes to the shotgun, its limited ammo pickups means that it's best saved for bosses and ultra-tough enemies. Seriously, how does an entire box of shotgun shells equate to 2 extra rounds? Meanwhile, Magnum and Uzi ammo is frequent enough by the late game that you can use them more frequently. In fact, the Magnums became my go-to by about the midpoint, though I still frequently swap back to the Infinipistols to conserve ammo. I don't have as much to add about the feel of the guns as I would in a shooter, thanks to the auto-aim doing most of the work for me, but I do want to note that I've always loved the way they sound in Tomb Raider, the Magnums especially. Sound design in general is stellar in Tomb Raider. Rather than a recurring music track running in the background the whole time, most of your gameplay in Tomb Raider will be spent in borderline silence, with only the ambient noises of the level and the sounds of Lara's footsteps to keep you company. Musical cues are saved for special moments like enemy ambushes, boss battles, and solving a puzzle. Essentially, you'll only hear music in Tomb Raider when you've done something right and are making progress. Are liminal spaces still a fad, or did I miss the train on that one? Because this sound design makes levels in Tomb Raider feel very liminal. The low draw distances in the original make it extra spooky, as you never know what could pop out at you. Let's say, for the sake of example, a T-Rex.
Holy fucking shit, it's a dinosaur Jesus Christ, what the fuck? Oh my fucking god, fucking dinosaurs, holy shit, what the fuck?
Tomb Raider is kinda silly at times, isn't it? That's not to say I don't like the look of the remastered visuals. In fact, I love them. Making a 32-bit 3D game look like it did in the cutscenes is all I've wanted since I was a kid, and this is my absolute favorite take on classic Lara in any of the original games. They even added her ponytail back in for the first game. That was actually intended to be present in the original release as well, but the development team couldn't find a way to keep it from draining too many resources and killing the frame rate. The only other option would have been to make it a flat texture, and that never looked good. Isn't that right, any random wrestling game from the same console generation? Oh yeah, that's the good shit. While I love being able to experience classic Tomb Raider how I always wanted it to look, the original visuals are still an impressive feat of programming for the time and deserve respect. The 30 FPS lock may be rough going at first, but it's important to take some time every now and then and appreciate how far 3D has come in fucking hell. Almost 30 years. But let's get away from the creeping dread that I've done nothing with my life and have no useful skills.
I didn't finish school and look at me! Who wouldn't envy where I am right now?
The weakest spot visually with the remastered graphics, and this extends to the other two games as well, is the water. Though I suppose there wasn't much they could do there if they wanted to keep the ability to toggle between the original and remastered visuals. See this flat texture, kids? This is what we used to consider water in 3D games. It's why your dad goes on and on about the orca chase near the beginning of Sonic Adventure. I mean, look at that gorgeous water. That shit was mind-blowing to 5-year-old me, and it permanently etched a Dreamcast logo onto my heart. I was in the intensive care unit about an hour later. My point being that it is what it is, and adding in a water physics system would have added extra to the budget that likely would have been passed on to the consumer. I wouldn't put it past Embracer to add an extra $10 to a price tag just for better water. Would you? As always, I've saved the story for last. Thrill-seeking adventurer Lara Croft is commissioned by business mogul Jacqueline Notla to locate an ancient artifact hidden high in the Peruvian Andes. Being one who, in her own words, plays for sport, Lara's curiosity is piqued and heads off to Peru. Once she has her hands on the artifact, though, she finds out that Notla sent one of her henchmen to dispose of Lara before she could even consider taking the artifact for herself. This stupidly paranoid decision on her part to kill Lara before she even became a problem winds up being what propels Lara to track down the other two pieces of this artifact, which the henchman refers to as the Scion. The voice actors repeatedly pronounce this as Scion, but I'm assuming that the devs meant it as how you would pronounce the actual word Scion. Lara has no clue what Notla intends to do with the Scion, nor does she care all that much, but nobody gets away with trying to stab Lara Croft in the back. The remainder of Tomb Raider's story is centered on Lara's quest for vengeance, and aside from the 11th hour turn for the completely bonkers that I'm not going to spoil here, there isn't a lot of story to speak of, much less a memorable one. Notla and her goons are two-dimensionally evil, while Lara is a static character who doesn't really have a stake in the events outside of pure spite. The intrigue that keeps the player hooked is more in the environmental storytelling of coming to grips with each level than anything to do with seeing Lara get her vengeance on Notla. You'll vividly remember the tough parts of the levels you fought to overcome, but struggle to remember the names of Notla's henchmen beyond French asshole who keeps taking pot shots at me. On top of the main game, Remastered went a step above and included the PC-exclusive expansion packs for all three games. In the first Tomb Raider's case, that would be Unfinished Business. This was actually my first time ever playing Unfinished Business, and yeah, I missed out on absolutely nothing. This is the definition of everything wrong with expansion packs and mission packs from this time period. The enemy count has tripled, the strong level design is replaced by levels that feel like they're designed for maximum confusion, and cheap tricks designed to kill a first-time player are present seemingly every 2 feet. It took me forever to realize that I had to shimmy all the way to this side before dropping so that the fall didn't kill Lara. I kept assuming I'd done something wrong since I couldn't get back out, and the only way down appeared to be certain death. I'll give Unfinished Business this: worrying that I'd soft-locked the game because of shoddy level design is something I've never experienced from a PS1 era Tomb Raider title. Unfinished Business is a fitting name. As if to twist the knife further, Unfinished Business doesn't even have the decency to have an actual ending once you finish the last level. It just abruptly cuts to credits. Imagine if I just cut to my conclusion mid- Tomb Raider blazed a trail for 3D platformers outside of the Nintendo sphere and left a massive mark on the industry you can still see to this day. Despite its multi-platform releases, Lara Croft would go on to become as much a platformer mascot of the PlayStation as Crash or Spyro, in addition to being the first video game character to have a Hollywood movie that didn't suck ass. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was damn sure closer to the games than the Super Mario Bros. Movie.
Monkey!
The game itself, meanwhile, I'm not gonna lie and say that it's aged like wine. Tomb Raider absolutely feels like a product of its time. However, that doesn't mean it isn't still an enjoyable game to play these days, because it is, very much so. But a remaster can only polish what's there. While said polish will never be enough to overcome the divisive nature of tank controls, and the modern control scheme has its own host of flaws, Tomb Raider still manages to hold together as a fun, engaging experience thanks to fantastic level design, a difficulty curve that's tough without being merciless, rewarding exploration, and an atmosphere thicker than my skull. Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3 Remastered is available on PC, Xbox Series X and S, as well as Xbox One, PS4 and 5, and Switch. As for whether or not you should get it for yourself, that's down to one simple question. Do you think $30 is a fair price for HD remasters of 3 32-bit platformers? Personally, I think so, but I also love these games to begin with, so I'm not exactly an unbiased source now, am I? Currently, because who knows how long it'll be before they get delisted, more frugal players curious about the first 3 Tomb Raiders can still purchase the original versions in a bundle for about $6 on GOG. I can't help you get a controller working easily on them though. It's possible, I managed to do it about 10 years ago, but I can't for the life of me remember what I had to do. Well, that's it for part 1 of my look at these remasters. Next time, I'm celebrating the fact that I made it a whole year on YouTube without giving up by righting a wrong that I made 23 years ago.
It's finally mine.
Go have fun at sport.
Hooray! Hooray for sport!